All right. Well, welcome again to another episode of Raising the Consciousness of Humanity. I am grateful this morning for a guest. His name is Daniel Epstein. He is the author of a book called Portraits in Faith, which is actually more than just a book. It's a traveling exhibit called Seeing the Other. And it's a project that Daniel has undertaken that was inspired to take on as much younger than he is now. But it's been a process of going through, I don't know, 30 countries, or I think it's more than that, 30 countries, 500 people, interviewing them, taking their picture, amazing photos. And it's even evolved to a project, a workshop called uh, listening or sacred listening. And so I'm so grateful, Daniel, that you are on the podcast this morning. And I just kind of want to start off a little bit about like your story, like what inspired you to pick up that camera or to make that decision and to start this whole thing called Portraits in Faith.
Well, thanks, Ron, and I appreciate you having me on this. Uh, well, it started 23, 24 years ago. I was traveling the world several times over a year for my job with Procter and Gamble, and I had gotten into photography, um, and I grew up Jewish in the South in Atlanta, so I've always kind of felt called to bring people together. I felt like the other and wanted to bring people together. And this idea of portraits in faith came to me in a photography workshop. I thought it was going to be about clergy, but the first church I went to, I could only find the janitor. And so I realized God and the universe had put the janitor in front of me, not the minister.
Hmm.
And soon after that workshop, I had to go to Brazil on business, and my photo instructor said, "Oh, I have a former student in Brazil, Tom. Why don't you get him to find you some people?" And then I had to be in Japan and Italy, and I just kept finding people who would be willing to share their story of whatever faith has been in their life,
Hmm.
spiritual journey, and I'd make a black and white portrait of them. And at some point, we started videoing the interviews. And 10 years ago, people were saying you really must share this publicly because I was just going around showing people my portfolio book.
Mhm.
And we were very lucky to get guidance from Ken Burns, the documentary filmmaker who became an advisor 12 years ago. And he said, "Have the courage to say this isn't a film. Everybody wants to make a PBS special, but not everything is meant to be that." So I decided to make a website and that we would add one more person every few weeks. So we're up to about 135 of the 500 have been published on our website.
Nice.
Uh, and we have about 600,000 views on YouTube and 4,000 subscribers who want to receive these stories of spiritual journey and faith from across all people, including atheists, agnostics. Um, it's assuming the person doesn't intend harm with their spiritual journey, I'm open to talking to them.
Nice. Well, I think it enlightens the world, this project you're doing. It enlightens me to just to go to your website, to look at the photos, to read the stories about people. And there's a lot of people today that don't travel. They don't have the means of travel. Their perception of the world is maybe only just a very local perception, or it might even be from just watching the news. And obviously, that sometimes is not aligned with what's really going on in the world. I'm sure you found that. Your project and what you do is, I think, is kind of like a gift in a way to humanity. Just because they, whether they go to your website, buy the book, it just and Daniel, the other thing too is I have noticed people that just seem to have this gift, which you have, is everybody can look through a lens of a camera. Everybody can buy technology at a certain level, right? everybody can do lighting and everybody can have a subject in front of them. But there's certain people that I think have this gift that allows them maybe to see I guess I would say the divine in the other person. And growing up, again, the magazine that comes to mind is National Geographic, but there's other magazines out there. But when you would see that, you'd say, "Wow, that person has a gift." And I'm noticing that in every single photo that you take of an individual, you bring out an essence. Um, was that learned? Was that just Tell me a little bit about your photography.
Mm. Well, I'm not really trained. I've been to a few photo workshops. Um, it's funny. I say that my eye turned on at some point. Um, and before that point, I had gone on trips and captured nothing interesting whatsoever with my
Yeah.
camera. And then after that trip, it happened to be a trip to Morocco with the Jewish community. I came back with images that I feel like my eye had turned on, but that was really still what they would refer to as still life. Market scenes, people taking pictures of spices in the marketplace. Occasionally, you might sneak a picture of a person. So when I was at that particular photo workshop, they said, start doing portraits and you can make appointments with people and ask them, can I make your portrait? And that was a breakthrough for me uh, to be very deliberate about making pictures of other people. And what I've always said is that my goal is not a glamour shot, but a picture to reveal each person's true spirit, especially as shown through their eyes. And I don't really know how many of the pictures turn out so nicely. I'm really grateful that they do. I think many times, most of the time, I'm interviewing people first and then making their portrait. So I think they've been primed
Mhm.
to be in a certain space of comfort with me and on the topic of that which is greater than us. So I think that probably helps. I do have a funny story though. Somebody helping me find people for a future shoot once said to me, "Oh, do you only want me to recruit attractive people? Because everybody in your pictures is so attractive." And, and I was like, "Well, of course I would never be so judgmental if that could even be
Yeah.
delivered upon and by whose standard." And then I realized, well, then if everybody was attractive, everybody must be attractive. Um,
Yes.
and sometimes when I'm walking down the street judging people, which I try not to do, but I'm human and I do it, I try to remember, oh, if I was making a portrait of this person, I would see their beauty, you know, uh,
Nice.
you know, in the words of Thomas Merton, see people shining like the sun. So I have to shift from the judgmental me to the photographer interviewer me, and I'm able to see people's true spirit.
Nice. Well, Daniel, I have a question. Have you been, so as long as you've been doing this, I guess, how has it transformed you from the moment you first started to where you are now? What changes has it brought up within you that maybe weren't true back when you first started?
Well, I think prior to starting this project, I had already embarked on a long journey of therapy and spiritual development and eventually some excellent medication. And I, but in the words of a psychiatrist in Boston, uh, once describing me to his colleague, he said, I was a young man who wasn't happy about much. And sadly, that was true. I had a real victim personality. Oh, woe is me. Why can't I? Uh, why aren't things seeming to work out? And I wasn't a very grateful person. And I think all of these things, but especially this project, have helped me feel more whole, more grateful, more optimistic. And I think what happened is, I think I really drafted off of other people's stories of healing, of wholeness, of gratitude,
Nice.
until I could develop that sense of faith and sacredness uh, myself. So this project has been a spiritual practice, not unlike meditation or prayer, but the act of receiving people's stories, uh, not saying much, but being in a receiving, listening mode, and and then practicing my art, trying to make a portrait that evokes their true spirit. Even the production, even those marketing director skills I have of pulling this whole thing together and getting it published online with a team. It's all a great gift, and it's all made me feel more whole and more connected to what I would call sacred spirit.
Yeah, and just like you tied in the fact that you have this marketing director background, you're kind of like, I think, put on this planet to do this type of thing.
I
And
call it my sacred errand.
there you go. Yeah, I like that. Sacred errand. Now, with this, have you ever run into a situation, if you can think back on any of these countries you visited or people you've interviewed, have you ever run into situations where you met any challenges? Maybe the person that you wanted to interview wasn't there or available, or maybe the camera didn't work, or anything that just didn't go or flow as you planned?
Well, there are, um, of course, the majority of people who say no, I'm not interested, I never see.
Yeah.
So I don't get that part of the story. But I have shown up to some interviews. We went to, even though I'm Jewish, we went to the ultra Orthodox rabbi in Caracas, Venezuela, and he said, "Well, you can make my portrait, but my picture can't appear next to anybody who's made a different religious decision." And I'm like, well, that would be a different project. That, that that doesn't cut it. And then there are people who, uh, for safety reasons, can't have their interview uh, or their portrait published. Uh, there have been people I've interviewed in China for who that was they said this is just for you. This is not to be published. Um, and then occasionally somebody I've interviewed, their story can't be published for some other reason. I interviewed a friend of mine who's a recovering addict, and then I got a call from her saying, "Hey, could you not publish that? I'm up for a federal judgeship, and I
Oh,
need to, I want to keep that out of the
yeah.
public domain." So you get stories like that, and I used to joke half joke that I would keep one blank spot for all the people whose interviews couldn't be published. Kind of
Mm,
like the chair for Elijah at the Passover Seder. All of those whose voices are not able to be heard at this moment.
interesting. Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm sure you uncover all sorts of things and all sorts of people and all sorts of situations, and privacy for various matters probably is important. At the same time, it's a select few that I think you have captured to be part of this work of art, this element that touches humanity. And I know you've had the opportunity to even be in exhibits. The Muhammad Ali Center looks like that was quite. You were in there for quite a while, as well as where else have you exhibited?
Well, let me just start with the story of the exhibit. And the way that you and I know each other
Yeah,
is through my partner, Gina Alisea.
Yeah.
And Gina deserves all the credit for conceptualizing and creating this exhibit. She saw my work, and she realized that it could be an exhibition. She runs a gallery at the University of Chicago Laboratory Schools called the Corvus Gallery. And so she is the one who conceptualized it as seeing the other, because of course our belief is there is no other.
Yeah.
So that debuted at the University of Chicago 3 years ago, and then or 2 years ago rather, and then last year it traveled to the Muhammad Ali Center in Louisville, Kentucky, the museum to Muhammad Ali's life, and it's been there for 10 months. It comes down on April 30th, and in a 2,500 square foot gallery, so nearly triple the size of the University of Chicago gallery. And it's been a great experience to be this temporary content at the Muhammad Ali Center.
Yeah, I'm sure you've probably gotten a lot of beautiful comments from people, especially when they're able to see these portraits. I'm sure probably even in a little larger size than displayed within the website or the book.
Yeah, it's wild. I step into the gallery and I really think to myself, where did all this come from? Um, I think really going back to that comment about prayer and meditation, we don't, um, once I finally started a prayer ritual in my life and then more recently a meditation ritual, we don't think of, oh, it's now been 600 days of meditation and the cumulative effect of you don't think that way. At least I don't think that way about it. And this is really the same thing, which is I kept interviewing people as I traveled. It was the most meaningful thing I could do with my time.
Mhm.
And then all of a sudden this exhibition appears. And of course, it took a lot of work by Gina to conceptualize it and create it. But from my perspective, it's been 24 years and boom, uh, I don't know how all of this has appeared.
Wow. Well, I know from looking through your website, there's obviously information on the book and the exhibit, but I scrolled down and I saw you had these questions. I guess these were questions that you would ask your subjects or the people that you were photographing. And can you share a little bit more about like what questions were these questions? Obviously, they were inspired by you, and it was about understanding them, understanding their faith, and you brought up that subject of prayer. I don't know if that ever came up, like, because I know even with my background being a little different between my wife's background and my background, and always understanding like rituals and prayer and faith is sometimes different, but sometimes the same in many ways. Uh, Tell me about some of these questions that you were inspired to ask people.
Yeah, well, the questions that I ask in the documentary and in the interviews are always the same 7 or 8 questions. And you'll notice that except for the very first one, which has a bit of a theological bent to it, the rest are not about theology or even ritual or prayer. They're about spiritual experience. So somebody might say, I accepted Christ as my Savior, or I became a Muslim, or I was a Catholic, became a Protestant, or vice versa. Uh, but I'm interested more in what happened for
Right.
them. What were they like before? What are they like now? How did life change? So the first question that is a bit theological is, what is your concept of God or a higher power if you have one?
Yep.
And I want to make a note here that my favorite interview in the whole project is with an atheist. So it's not necessarily traditional understandings of God and spirit and universal sacredness. So that's the theological question. But then the other questions are, what does it mean to have faith? And what's your earliest memory of having faith?
Hmm.
What was the first time in your life you feel like you had to or chose to rely upon God as you understand God? Tell me about a time you doubted your faith and what happened.
Nice.
And then I ask a few more general questions, but they're always lovely to hear the responses to. What are you most grateful for? What's your greatest wish? Do you have a message? And what would you like people to know about you when they see your portrait? So
Nice.
those are the questions that I ask people, these 400 or 500 people around the world. I say 400 because I didn't start properly interviewing people till about 1 year in. I was just making portraits and talking to people about their faith, but the interviews started formally in Japan about a year later. Um, so I have about 400 interview videos and 500 portraits. Um, Now, Gina Alisea, our curator, uh, helped come up with these questions that we also use in our workshops and in the exhibition, which is, who do you see as the other? When have you felt like the other? What can we do to dismantle our misperceptions of others? And what will it take to create more unity amongst humanity? And the connection between those two sets of questions is that uh, my operating belief here is that it's by sharing the answers to those first questions that we can most diffuse this notion of otherness. Uh,
Mm,
that by hearing somebody's sacred story, whatever that's been, again, assuming they don't intend harm, I'm not going to interview the 9/11 hijackers who might
sure.
have done that in the name of faith. Um, so we're not going there. But if I can understand somebody's spiritual journey, as different as it may be from me, it's hard for me to see them as the other. And so that's why we use those second set of questions about otherness in our exhibition and in our sacred listening workshops.
Nice. I like that. And I think obviously it connects people to, to the heart. And Gina did a little bit of that with a group that I was in not too long ago, and we were able to partner up with people and ask those questions. And I really felt a deep connection, not just to the partner that I was partnered with, but maybe even with the whole room.
Yeah, one of the questions we don't ask, but which recently came to me because it's meaningful in my life, is who or what is a group you used to think of as the other that you no longer do? And for me, that answer is Christians. I grew up, we moved to Atlanta, Georgia when I was 5 years old from Cleveland. And let's just say being the little Jewish boy with the yarmulke and the tzitzis, the little fringes hanging out, uh, did not go over well in the neighborhood. Um, and then once I went from private school to public school, and can you believe the first day of public school they served pigs in a blanket for lunch? What's a kid to do? So I ate the blanket. Uh,
Yeah.
so I definitely felt like the other, and I was taught, or circumstances taught me, that you had to watch out for Christians because they were going to try and convert you, and uh, and we killed their Messiah. I'm like, okay, well, I don't have those fears anymore. I I have many dear friends who are Christian, born again Christians, Catholics,
Yeah.
uh, and I just don't you know I just don't have those fears anymore. I don't think of Christians as the other, but I did growing up. And so to me, that's a question of great hope because we see we can change our attitudes about different groups. Um,
Yeah.
and so I'd like to add that to our workshops in the future.
Yeah, Daniel, that's like it's all about unity. It's all about oneness. And you really hit the nail on the head with is it the other or is it the group? Because we sometimes form those opinions or judgments, sometimes unknowingly, maybe in our early childhood or maybe around the other adults that we're with and absorb their beliefs. But I like that question. I would say that I think things shift in people the moment they're asked a question.
Mm. Yeah, that's a great point. The question itself can be transformative. I have heard from people that the experience of being interviewed is really powerful, and I did get somebody to interview me. I haven't published that interview yet, but I've had that experience. I should mention that when I started this project, I thought it was about everybody in the world should get to tell their story. And then a dear friend of mine, Ann Harbison in Minneapolis, sent me the book written by the creator of StoryCorps uh, that gets featured on public radio, uh, David Issei. And the name of his book is Listening is an Act of Love. And I realized, oh my gosh, this project isn't about telling your story. It's about listening to someone's story. It's the act of receiving somebody's sacred story without comment, with gratitude, and honoring them. In my case, I try to honor them by making a portrait that evokes their true spirit. Um, but yes, I realized that this was not about telling, it's about listening.
Yes, you're right. And getting, I guess, it's a sense of closeness, it's a sense of understanding, it's a sense of embodying, I guess, that sacred oneness that to many of us is a intellectualized term talked about, but when you do that workshop, and I'm sure you must feel, people must give you a lot of praise or compliments afterwards because the transformation I think happens when you're actually in the experience more than just talking about it.
Yeah, that's what's happened for me. So imagine having what you experienced 500 times as you travel. I think the travel adds a whole nother component. You're in a foreign place. Uh, I'm really not much of a tourist anymore. You know, when I go to another country, what I mainly want to do is receive some people's stories. I don't
Yeah.
want to go to a country and not have interviews from there. Uh, and it's just such a meaningful way to be somewhere and to receive a series of people's stories.
Now, when you're in a country for a while, do you feel some sort of, I mean, obviously because of the work you do you feel some sort of like connection to the country, to the people? Does I know you said you were traveling there for business and you had the ability to also do this, but do you walk away sometimes feeling like, wow, that just felt like another home?
Well, I wouldn't say another home, but between my business interactions and and I'm really fortunate. I have friends all around the world. Uh, Gina likes to say I come with people.
Yeah.
Um, you know, I was part of a very large, incredible company, Procter and Gamble, and I have colleagues and friends around the world because of that. So that actually has made me feel like family wherever I go. And then I have this additional experience of interviewing people about their most sacred, their most intimate story. Um, and that makes me feel very connected to them. Um, I don't want to say that it feels like home, though. Home is here in Cincinnati, and home is wherever Gina is, um, and that's Chicago and Sarasota.
Yeah.
So I feel like, and where my godchildren and best friends are, uh, that's where home is. But I feel connected wherever I go. I feel I belong to the world, if you will.
Good
So
answer. Yeah. Yeah. No, that's beautiful. I remember years ago when I was in Indonesia for a while working, and I felt so connected with everybody. Daniel, it wasn't until like I was getting ready to be taken to the airport and they wanted one last photo. And I believe there was no like cell phones, like they didn't have technology. So I think it was a Polaroid. But anyways, the photo was taken, and it wasn't until that moment when I got the photo, and I'm like, wow, that's me. I, I felt weird. I was like looking at the photo. I'm the white guy in the middle that's taller than everybody else, and it just didn't feel like the way I felt because I had been there so long, immersed within the culture. And so I'm sure that you probably have those experiences in many ways too, and obviously throughout all your travel. I mean, what would you say was like maybe the most profound or most interesting maybe place or country that you went to? I'm sure that's hard to answer that question because there's probably so many, but what would you say memory wise was the one that you found to be maybe even different than you expected?
well, I think one of the most interesting, complex countries in the world is Brazil.
Hmm.
And And it was the first country I went to after this photography workshop where this project started. And I just think the number of influences in Brazil are just fascinating. And in particular, the African rooted religions like candomblé, which the slaves brought over with them, and which are these beautiful religious practices and very welcoming communities. Um, I would also say that not one particular place, but wherever I am with indigenous people, whether that's First Nations people in Canada, Native Americans in the US, especially Aboriginal elders in Australia. I have learned so much from indigenous people and their connection to the land, their connection to the animals, seeing God not just in all people, but in all of creation. You know, the uncle that is the rock and the tree that is the grandfather. Uh, and it has caused me to honor all of creation um, in a way that I didn't naturally feel before that. So I think probably Brazil as a country and indigenous people globally have been the most learning field. And then, you know, what I'd also say is uh, I have found that each of the religions um, has something for me.
Mm.
You know, from my own native Judaism, you may not know this, but Israel, Yisrael, which again, before it was the name of a country, it's the name that Jacob receives after he
Oh,
wrestles with the angel. And Yisrael means to struggle with God. So as a native Jew, I get to struggle with God, and that's the highest ideal of my religion. And but from my Christian friends and the Christians that I interview, I learn about God's unconditional love and allowing that love to come in. And from my Muslim friends, you may be aware that Islam means to be submitted to God.
yeah.
So from my Muslim friends, I learned to submit myself to that which is greater than me. And you know, from my indigenous interviews, I learned to see God in all living and non-living things in creation. And then from my atheist friends, I learned to honor that right to say you don't believe or to believe in something non-theistic, uh, and to see the beauty in that. So I learned from all, I need all these energies, is what I say. And so I feel like there isn't an interview I can't learn from and appreciate.
Yes. You seem like you have that inquisitive mind and that open heart, and you create that perfect space for the person to be interviewed. You also reference your team, and I saw on your website how you give gratitude to so many of these people that you mentioned their names of the people that have helped you, and you even have teams abroad. And that is that for helping to line up appointments or
Well, it's both for lining up appointments and production. I
right?
do hire freelance producers wherever I go.
Nice.
Hey, I'm coming to Portugal. Uh, I'd like to interview 3 to 4 people a day for a few days. Could you find people of a variety of spiritual journeys, backgrounds, religions that'd be willing to share their story with me and have a portrait made? So I have freelance producers, some of whom are journalists, some of whom are just friends of friends, some of whom are actually freelance producers in the commercial industry or the movie industry, who are used to this kind of production work, and they'll accompany me when I get there. Um, or, or rather, and I have a production team that helps me. I do all the photography and the videoing myself, but when I come home, um, I have a video editor, Laura Friedman in Toronto, who's a dear friend and has been working with me for 12 years. She's responsible for all things that we do with the video content, from transcribing to editing. And then Petra Kovac Fernandez in Maui, a Hungarian in Maui, um, is responsible for graphic design. She cleans up all of my photos and manages the workflow. We have a copy editor, Mary Holden in Phoenix, who edits all of my words, and we have a PR consultant. And so I do make use of my marketing director skills also and pull together this little virtual team. I think our sound is being edited in Thessaloniki and in Bogota, and our website was just developed by Ezra in New Zealand. So it's definitely
Wow.
a virtual village.
Yeah, a virtual and global village that you've brought together, not only in the pursuit of being able to photograph and interview people, but also in the production side of it as well. So that's beautiful. That's yeah. I guess my question is sacred listening. That is a workshop that you're now doing, and how do people find out more about that? Because to me, that in itself, I think that has a great impact on people. So how do people find out about the sacred listening workshop?
Well, just go to our website and you'll see the contact information, and you can contact us. The sacred listening workshops are where we give people the experience of receiving somebody's story, ideally someone that's different from them. So we can orchestrate that for you, creating a session that is more heterogeneous rather than homogeneous. Or you can do that, maybe you're a church and you want to invite a local synagogue or a mosque to join you one afternoon for a sacred listening workshop. We're also about to experiment with doing sacred listening workshops amongst recently released incarcerated men.
Right.
And then that might evolve to sacred listening workshops between people who've been incarcerated and people who never have been, because that's certainly
Yeah.
the other for people. The same with, I'm about to experiment with a sacred listening workshop amongst the chronically homeless. Um, and that may yield some new possibilities to have people who are homeless be with people who have homes and
Mm.
houses. Um, and So, there's so many different versions of the other. And if we can create some of these sacred experiences of people receiving each other's story, I think it will really start to make a dent in the healing that we need in this very polarized world.
You're absolutely right. And yes, you're right. And those groups that you just talked about, obviously, I would say that in a way breaks down those barriers within our minds and our hearts about the other and incarcerated versus not incarcerated, like opinions that people have and beliefs that have. To me is very resonant with the word forgiveness,
Mm.
which is a process that happens within the self relative to the opinion or judgment or whatever it might have been about a group or the other or the outer world. I think this is beautiful that what you're doing. I think it's really, yeah, I think it's really uh, transformative in many, and it's perfect for the times that we're in.
Mm.
Because as we see what's going on in the world, it's people always ask, well, what can I do? I mean, it's sometimes we're thought grab the picket sign or go stand on the street corner, but by doing this and bringing people together and being able to get them to connect on that level, I think it's transformative in so many ways. So I really appreciate you taking the time to do this interview and sharing your project, sharing what you've done. I question is you have you brought any of this into schools at all?
Well, just the University of Chicago Laboratory School,
Yeah.
where we did have age appropriate curriculum. So even with the fourth graders,
Oh,
By the
nice.
way, fourth graders move around a lot and they touch things.
Yeah.
Uh, uh, they, for them, we did sacred listening, but not with the spirituality-based questions, but what is your earliest memory? You know, what's the first thing you can remember? And what are you most grateful for? And what's your greatest wish? And that worked really well with fourth graders. But then I've also um, been into the high school world religion classes for 3 years at the laboratory school, where students have to put together, compare and contrast 3 interviews. And they can be from my website, it can be from self-reflection using my questions, or it can be them interviewing someone. And that's a very powerful exercise as well. So, you know, there's ways to adapt this by age. We do have some curriculum examples. Teachers are and professors are more than welcome to use the content. It's all online. And
Oh, nice.
yeah.
Wow. Yeah. And I like, I mean, the fact that all of us are born in different places around the world, different cultures, different communities, live different life situations. When you talk about incarcerated versus non-incarcerated, or homeless versus somebody who maybe was born with a very fortunate life. And yeah, so many of these comparing and contrasting, you break down all those barriers and get everybody to be able to connect it in the heart of love. And that's just so wonderful. That's powerful. How do people find out, about your book? And if they want to buy your book and find out more about where is the next exhibit or anything else about you?
Please go to portraitsinfaith.org. So it's portraitsinfaith.org, and you'll see everything from a tab where you can find the book, to a tab about our exhibits, uh, to a tab that allows you to look at all the published portraits and interviews so far. So, and if you're into spiritual things, you'll find some luminaries that I've been fortunate to interview. It's not the majority of my interviews, but I've been fortunate to interview people like Richard Rohr and Matthew Fox and Parker Palmer and
Oh,
Mirabai Starr and Valerie Kaur. And I just uh, published an interview that I had done 15 years ago with Father Thomas Keating. Um, so, you know, there's some notables in there as well, but we have about 135 of the people's interviews published, all right there at portraitsinfaith.org. And you could contact us through the contact form for information about sacred listening workshops. Be happy to come to your community and lead one.
excellent. Well, I will share your website below the link below the video in the description. And yeah, Daniel, this has been great. I would love to have you on again because I'm sure other questions will come up. But is there any last words that you would love to share with the audience that might be beneficial to anybody out there?
Yeah, I really think it's an inside job, even in these difficult, polarizing times. And I'd love to quote, you know, somehow I've ended up as a Jew with all these Catholic mystics as my heroes, starting with Thomas Merton. And I was so lucky 2 weeks ago to go to the Hermitage of Thomas Merton at Gethsemane with the spiritual teacher James Finley. And but this is my favorite quote from Thomas Merton, and I think it's what's called for in this moment where we feel so polarized. And Thomas Merton must have said this in the 60s. I don't know the exact date,
Mm.
but this is what he said. So instead of loving what you think is peace, love others and love God above all. And instead of hating the people you think are war makers, hate the appetites and the disorder in your own soul, which are the causes of war. If you love peace, then hate injustice, hate tyranny, hate greed, but hate these things in yourself, not in another.
Oh, wow. Very profound. Yeah.
think that's the work. I think even when we do this sacred listening and can honor the other person, what we're essentially doing is hating those parts of ourselves that would even be drawn to hate,
Yeah.
as opposed to hating the other, but to hate the disorder in my own soul, which causes me to hate.
Yeah. And the first step of recognizing it, that's within.
Right. And I
Yeah.
really do think this is an inside job. Um, that's what I've learned from these interviews.
Yeah.
There was nothing holding me back in God's universe, in this sacred universe, but me. I, newsflash, I was the problem.
Yeah. Nice. Well, Daniel Epstein, thank you so much. Portraits in Faith, the art of seeing the other. I really loved our interview. I'm like I said, would be happy, more than happy to have you back on again. And I really appreciate your time this morning for our audience. Thank you so much, Daniel.
Yeah, thank you, Ron. I really appreciate it.
Thanks.